Philadelphia experiment, as I previously stated, locked up with the Phoenix Project, and it could only lock up on a very critical date. And that critical date was the 12th of August, 1943, and the 12th of August, 1983. Theoretically, it could have locked up in 1963, but there was no ongoing experiment at that time, such as the Phoenix Project, which was required. Dr. John Von Neumann was, of course, the second and final director of the Philadelphia experiment. He was also the first director of the Phoenix Project when it came online after the war, and it went through several phases. But the important phase of the Phoenix Project was from 1975 through 1983, when they developed the capability of time travel and the time tunnels, as Dr. Carl Sagan liked to call them, the wormholes in space. Wormholes in space and time. They had the capability, and it was fully functional. Someone had to know, in order to get these two experiments on either end to lock up, that there were critical dates in which it would work, and the rest of the years in between it would not work. And someone had to communicate this information to both ends. And this is the thrust of my discussion, and what happened, and why this whole thing locked up, and what some of the mechanics of, and technology of time is all about. I have a few slides I will add and put in here a little bit later, but I want to get into some more of this material first. The director of the Psi Corps himself was obviously a psychic. And he went on through the period of time, and because he was a member, in essence, of the K group, and most of your aliens have the capability of time travel, they knew what was going on at both ends. I've stated in the other prior lecture, and I'll have to state it again, the real purpose of the two projects, quite aside from the patent scientific advancement which was desired by our scientists here in the United States and on Earth, was the purpose of locking these two projects up for a very specific reason. The very specific reason was to provide a rift in space-time 40 years wide and hold it there long enough to let some very large spaceships through from another time frame dimension. Now, in 1947 onward, the K group was pretty much lost. And came 1954, there was another group which came into purview of the government, and that was, of course, the Greys. There was a series of UFO crashes in New Mexico in 1947, 48, and 49. I won't go into them in detail. But because of that, the government sent a call out through the vast array of radio telescopes in New Mexico, a call for help into outer space. We have an alien here. We don't know what to do with him. He's ill. How do you take care of him, et cetera, et cetera? Is there anybody out there that knows who he is and what you do with him? The government got an answer. It took a while, but they got an answer. A group of small ships showed up in about 1953 with some Greys on them, and then there was an exchange of ideas and thoughts, and some hostages went both ways. With the promise of return in 1954, which the Greys did do in very large numbers, landed at either Edwards or Holloman Air Force Base, or both. Eisenhower disappeared out of Palm Springs in one of his golfing weekends to Edwards, met with the aliens, and signed an agreement, a non-interference agreement, in which we agreed not to interfere with each other's civilizations, and there would be an exchange of technology. Well, the non-interference agreement didn't last very long, because it became very obvious to our government that the Greys weren't keeping it, and what exchange of technology took place was not perhaps all that was expected. The important point was that our government agreed to provide bases for them underground, some 75, full underground railroad system. Construction started in 1959. But the Greys came in very large numbers. We don't know how many. The government perhaps does. It's estimated now they're probably in excess of 1 million. And a very large ship that came in went into orbit around Earth, and they provided shuttles down to the surface of the Earth. They could not have gotten through without that rift in space-time. Now, they were here. Other groups were here. There was a group from Orion. They actually were in charge of, in many respects, not formally, in charge of the scientific development of the Phoenix Project. Therefore, they knew what it was capable of. They helped set up the science and the technology, and they also knew of the critical dates. The dates of 12 August is actually the function of the Earth's biorhythms. The Earth has a series of biorhythms, 4 of them, which, like the human biorhythms, do peak out once every so often. Nobody in our scientific community knew anything about this. It turns out, from what I've learned, that the ancients knew about it. Let us say, the recluse lamas in Tibet and elsewhere knew about it. They do have a great deal of knowledge. And they knew that the Mother Earth is actually a living entity, unlike the rock science, which is taught to us in the colleges, and has a sort of consciousness, perhaps nothing we can understand. But nonetheless, as a living entity, has its own biorhythms. And those biorhythms, 4 of them, peak out once every 20 years. A window approximately a day wide, usually falls on the 12th of August, plus or minus a day, because our Gregorian calendar is not all that accurate. It misses 0.24 days per year, and once every century you have to add a year to correct the calendar.